Hello all and welcome to this lunchtime learning session hosted by Santander. This is the latest in our Green Mortgage Masterclass series and we'll talk about the role that financial services can play in retrofitting existing homes. Retrofitting and energy efficiency of the UK housing stock has become an increasingly salient topic in the mortgage market circles. Green mortgages have been increasingly coming to the market over the past few years. There's been back and forth over net zero targets from various governments and also changing legislative plans to potentially put in new EPC requirements for the private rented sector. So this is all made energy efficiency of UK housing stock an issue that is not only important now, but that is going to grow in importance in coming years. In this session, we will talk about the barriers that homeowners and landowners are facing, how we can work more collaboratively to create solutions, and what the future is for green finance. I'm joined by Mick Taylor, Head of Green Finance Homes at Santander, and Chris Hall, Product Manager for Green Finance Homes at Santander. And there will also be time for questions and answers at the end of the session, which you can submit through the platform, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. So without further ado, over to you, Mick and Chris.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining us today for this masterclass. It's fantastic to see so many people on the call. And thank you to Anna and the team for giving Chris and I this opportunity. So have we got the slides up on screen now? Okay, if we can just skip on to slide 2, Chris, and I'll do a quick introduction. So a bit of background about me. So my name's Mick Taylor. I've done 12 years in product development at Santander. I was a former portfolio owner for first-time buyers, new build and buy-to-let. And I also led the cross-industry development of both the Help to Buy and mortgage guarantee schemes. So plenty of experience in dealing with change. I'm now heading up Green Finance in Homes, which is part of Santander's Retail and Business Bank. And from speaking to brokers, I know there's a lot of interest in supporting clients to retrofit. And I also know that some firms have made great progress in developing new client journeys and propositions. So it's fantastic to be given the opportunity to be part of today's masterclass. Chris?
Thanks, Mick. Good afternoon, all. Chris, I've got 14 years experience within Santander, but worked within the financial industry now for a scary 20 years, similar to Mick in a variety of different roles. And over the last 2 years, I've been working directly with Mick around helping customers, brokers, in terms of decarbonising their homes. And it's great to be with you.
Thanks, Chris. And if we can move straight on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so 2 challenges UK faces to reduce carbon emissions from our homes. Challenge number 1, this is the easy one, it's the building of new homes. More than 90% of new builds have an energy efficiency rating of B or higher. So their new build homes are fantastically energy efficient versus existing stock. And you're probably already very familiar with lenders already recognising this, and there's various differentiated affordability policies or product pricing in the market. And the good news still to come is when we get the new legislation, the Future Homes Standard, which is due at some point this year, but a date is yet to be confirmed, new build homes will be around 75 to 80% more energy efficient. And these homes will be net zero by 2030. So that's, a massive contribution towards reducing carbon from our homes. So the benefits of new builds, so they already offer several benefits to homeowners and lenders. So typically lower monthly energy bills, and with the products in the market today, there's an opportunity for those in new build homes to get lower, to have lower monthly mortgage payments as a result from the small reduction rates some lenders are offering. And obviously there's a reduced maintenance cost of having a new build property. So new build is really important for lenders. So we get that, we get a share of that market so we can improve the quality of our mortgage stock. However, the second challenge, how do we improve existing housing stock, is the hard challenge. That's by far poses the biggest challenge. So if you look at the graph on the right, just 7% of existing stock has an EPC band of B or higher. So this is very low versus new build homes where that's 93%. So massive difference. So you can imagine there's a lot of competition amongst lenders to fight for those new homes. But if we go back to the existing housing stock, so 6 in 10 homes today in the UK are in EPC band D or below. And the government ambition is to get all homes, where possible, to a minimum EPC band C by 2035. Yes, this is ambitious, but it's also necessary. The problem or the challenge that we have is there isn't a clear roadmap yet. So how will this be achieved? And that's likely to be a carrot and stick approach. We know there's a consultation on minimum energy efficiency standards in the private rented sector. That consultation closes on the 2nd of May, and we may get a response to that consultation at some point later in the year. And the other side of that is there's also some government-led discussions around measures to drive demand, some more incentives. What can the government do in terms of subsidised green loans? What can they do in terms of looking at tax benefits? So I think there's a real carrot and stick approach required here, you know, because it comes back to the question, what is the motivation for homeowners and landlords to upgrade their homes? It probably has to be a combination of legislation and incentives. And then it creates the big question, who pays? So installing green measures like solar panels and heat pumps typically have high upfront costs and come with some level of disruption. And they also come with long payback periods. So why would the public pay? Why would homeowners pay for something that doesn't often make financial sense? And of course, the government have made net zero a legally binding target. But with that, there's not enough money in Treasury to fund a transition. So what we're likely to see is that homeowners and landlords will have to meet some or most of those costs. So the big challenge ahead of us, the roadmap isn't clear yet, and there's definitely uncertainty around how the transition to net zero will be funded. So the question is, you know, do you know how many of your landlord and your owner-occupied client bases are in properties with an EPC band of D or below? We know the government data suggests that this will be around 60%. So there's quite a big proportion of your client base in our mortgage books as lenders who are going to be impacted by this in the very near future. Just jump on to the next slide, please, Chris. So the challenge to retrofit UK homes is huge. It's the biggest challenge UK housing has faced in modern times. And around 20% of our greenhouse gases in the UK come from our homes, and 3/4 of that 20% comes from how we heat our homes. As we've got 29 million homes in the UK producing these gases every day, so you can see the sheer scale of the challenge. And each house on average produces around 3,000 kilograms of CO2 per year just from the heating. Net zero requires this number to come down to just 138 kilograms. So from 3,000 down to 138, so a big, a monumental shift over the next 2 decades. However, if we just focus on the near term, so the next 5 to 10 years, and the need or ambition to get all homes to a minimum EPC band of C, 18 million homes will need some level of green upgrade, and 3 million of those homes are in the private rented sector. So whilst this is a huge challenge, it's really important that we recognise this will be a huge opportunity as well. Clients and customers are likely to need support from brokers and lenders, and that might be through raising awareness about the legislation that's coming down the tracks. They might need help with planning particular changes for their properties. How can they get their properties to be compliant with the new legislation? And how can they go about finding reliable installers with the right accreditation? And how can they navigate new products and propositions that lenders are developing and brokers are developing to address these needs? So as I said, this is not just a challenge, it's a huge opportunity. So if I look at Rightmove data, Rightmove are estimating that the cost of retrofitting our homes to the minimum level of C is going to be around 200 billion, and each home having to have around £11,000 of upgrades on average. And where we've got 3 million homes in the private rented sector who are going to be impacted first, that is a 23 billion bill to upgrade those rental properties to the minimum standard. And whilst the legislation itself is yet to be published, the consultation closes on the 2nd of May, we do expect to hear how that implementation will land and be, that legislation will land and be implemented later this year. So if you look at the dates that were proposed in the legislation, for the private rented sector, the date of compliance for new tenancies was proposed as 2028, with all tenancies being compliant by 2030. This is incredibly close. And, the numbers we're talking about to retrofit are massive. This is a massive total amount of expenditure. And much of that will require funding, and in a very, very short space of time. And that's just looking at the near term. So to get to the minimum of C, that's 28 million homes need some improvement to reach net zero by 2050. That goes up to 28 million homes by the time we get towards 2050. So some massive numbers there, but also some massive amounts of cost and borrowing to help achieve that. We're not retrofitting many homes at the moment today. And to get to the net zero target, we need to be hitting around 1.5 homes per minute. That's if we start today, and that's over 2,000 homes per day. So a massive amount of scale lies ahead. So our customers and your clients will need us to be part of that solution. As the estimated cost of retrofitting is huge, homeowners and landlords are likely to need funding. And over the next decade, sooner for landlords, we need a combination of products and propositions so that lenders and brokers can first and foremost support our customers and clients, but also be ready for the commercial opportunities that such a big transition will bring. We're all going to be involved, whether we plan to or not. This challenge isn't going to go away, and it will become more imposing the closer we get to 2050. So the lenders and brokers who get it right will be the ones who benefit most, and will be the ones who are taking proactive steps now, rather than the ones who react when it's too late. So action now is important rather than leaving it too late. So thanks for moving on to the next slide, Chris. So Santander published our first Tomorrow's Homes report in April last year, and that was a really comprehensive piece of research covering the views of, I think it was 4,000 representative sample of UK homeowners and tenants in a single survey. And in addition to that, there was a smaller number of in-depth consumer interviews. We repeated the research again this year, and we'll be publishing the new edition of Tomorrow's Homes report. We did publish the new editions of the Tomorrow's Homes report last month. And many of the findings in the report don't come as a surprise. Lots of people believe improving energy efficiency is important and needs addressing, and they also see the value in doing it. However, very few have acted or plan to act, and this is known, or what we call as the value action gap. So lots of people recognize the importance of doing it, but very few people actually taking steps or actions to do their bit. And I think, what we have seen in recent years has been huge global volatility in energy costs. And we've probably more acutely experienced that in the UK. And that's raised the prominence of home energy efficiency. So making households more aware of the energy consumption. So I think, like myself, most of you on the call have probably looked for better energy tariffs or looked for smarter energy tariffs over the last couple of years to try to mitigate the rising costs that we're all seeing. And the research pulls out that 44% of those surveys said they'd rationed their heating in the last year. So people are taking quite drastic action as a result of the exposure to the volatility in the energy markets. And also, I think it was nearly half said improving home energy efficiency would have a significant impact on their life. So this is an issue that is having a real impact on people's lives today. But the research also highlighted knowledge gaps. And this is quite surprising. So around 2/3 of those 4,000 respondents don't know the energy efficiency rating of their home. And of those people, 3/4 don't know how to find out. And it's really easy to find out if your home's got an EPC and what your EPC band is by going onto the government website. It's a dead easy thing to find out, but lots of people don't know that simple functionality exists. Upfront costs are also thought to be prohibitive, even with the government grants that are in place today on heat pumps. So 3/4 of respondents said they could not afford to upgrade their gas heating system to a heat pump. Gas boilers will shortly be banned from new homes. And while there is no firm date for this ban to extend to existing homes, it is likely to happen at some point in the relatively near future. And payback period of the key retrofit measures like heat pumps and solar panels typically is quite long, often 10 years plus. And the research, when speaking to consumers, even the small retrofit steps such as insulation aren't a priority. 4 in 5 people said they haven't or aren't planning insulation in the next 2 years. And as part of the Tomorrow's Homes research, what we did is we gave respondents a hypothetical £10,000 to spend on home improvements. And just £1,400 of that was allocated to energy efficiency improvements. And as you'd expect, most people allocated the money to upgrading their kitchens and bathrooms. So things that are typically seen as being more desirable and that would add more value to their home. Our last round of research found the same knowledge gaps exist, but what we have seen is a shift in some customer behaviour. So more than half, 52%, stated this time around that improving their home's energy efficiency is a priority, and that was up from around 1/3 last year. So this, we think, is being driven by the direct financial impact we're all experiencing as a result of rising energy costs in the last 12 months. And finance is absolutely a key motivator here. And finance here can take the form of either what energy efficiency changes could reduce monthly energy bills. So how can you lower your monthly energy bills and also protect yourself from further rises? Or is there anything you can do that will see value added to your home? And where making energy efficient home improvements aren't economically viable, as is often the case with single measure retrofits, it's very difficult to see why homeowners would invest. And Chris, just if we can just skip on to the next slide. So just to give you a bit of, I won't cover this slide in detail, but just to give you some additional background as to why banks are playing an active role in this. So we're very much on the hook to play a role in the decarbonisation of homes. And as founder members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, Santander are required to set decarbonisation targets for our mortgage book, with the first key targets, due to be set within the next 5 years, and that's across all lenders. We also measure the amount of CO2 our mortgage books produce, and that's known as what we call financed emissions. And that calculation looks at various aspects such as the size of the home, the energy rating, and then the loan to value. And then the financed emissions are calculated by the proportion of the lending on a particular property. So an example of that, if we have a 50% loan to value property, Santander are accountable for reporting 50% of the emissions from that home. And we also have targets. We have targets to get our financed emissions to net zero by 2050 with interim targets and steps along the way. And this is what we call our net zero pathway. So how do we get from the CO2 emissions from our mortgage book today to net zero? We also measure the EPC bandings across our mortgage book, and we do this every 6 months. And this information is published in our annual reports. So we like to be able to track to see if we're improving the number of A and B and C properties we have in our book, and also if the number of D and below rated properties is declining. We know that the government are planning the minimum energy efficiency standard legislation for the private rented sector, so we really need to work with brokers and customers to make sure the market is aware of and is preparing for these legislative changes. So banks and building societies have a lot of skin in the game, and we need to make sure we play our part in doing the right thing by customers and by you brokers. I'll take a break now. I'll hand off to Chris, who will take a look at how the market is developing and some of the things that we've been trying.
Thanks, Mick. So as you can see, and as Mick has just mentioned, there is skin in the game from banks and building societies, banks such as Santander, and as you'll see, the plethora of other offerings that our competitors have been offering in terms of a green finance journey. Now, currently, and has been the case over the last 2 to 3 years, predominantly the incentive is linked to cashbacks to customers once the works have been completed, along with the partner offering. There's a reason for that. Banks need to be able to prove that the funds that have been lent have been used for green purposes. So by being able to create a process where you pay cashbacks on the completion of those works, it allows the banks then to know that those monies have been used for green finance. To give you an example of a real life case at the moment in terms of a customer proposition. So if we take the Santander one as an example, Santander have partnered with a number of different partners, one of those being Octopus. And we've been working with Octopus since May 24. Providing that a customer meets the terms and conditions of the offer between the two companies, Santander would provide a customer with £1,000 cashback, and Octopus would further reduce the cost of the installation by £500. So in essence, the real cost savings to a customer on an installation of solar will be £1,500. And that's not hugely dissimilar, as you can probably see along the screen, of other banks doing similar options. There's also discounts and cashbacks available to A and B properties. So touching on the point of Mick, rewarding those customers who are already in an A and B property, but also making sure that you reward customers who are on that decarbonisation journey. I'm just going to flick onto the next slide. So let's just take a quick look then in terms of the Santander journey and the offering in more detail. So as I said, in May 24, we'd created our new Greener Homes Hub. And what we wanted to do was to create a hub that could provide customers the support right the way through the journey, from the starting point of learning and having the education piece through to providing a number of installers, personalized customer journeys and incentives. To support that, we then also did our own marketing campaign. Since that date, we've sent over 8 million emails and interstitials. Interstitial is basically when you're already logged into your online banking, you'll have the pop-up which provides you some additional information. We also use data science to identify who would be the customers who would be most likely to want to find out this information. So a huge amount of heavy lifting from a bank's perspective in terms of creating new partnerships, providing cashbacks, creating new website content and marketing campaign to those numbers. What we see is very similar to the Tomorrow's Homes report that Mick touched on earlier. Over 40,000 customers have come into the Greener Homes Hub and started to look at the detail that we display. So that demonstrates that there is a demand out there for customers to want to know more. The challenge that we have is when you see the high effort and the high upfront challenges that we face versus then the low activity that comes out of it, it probably comes as no surprise that even when banks are providing cashbacks and things like that, the upfront cost is still a big challenge. Another factor that we have to take into account is that many of our journeys lack that human touch. They're all very digital, and it's conversations like we're having today where sometimes that customer is looking to have that conversation with a professional to be able to help them as they go through. This slide is just drawing out really that from Santander's perspective, it's not just down to banks trying different methods. There's also loads of other things that are going on, some that you may be aware of, some that you may not be. And very much to Mick's point earlier, it's about that carrot and stick. And I just want to bring out a couple of what we would consider to be the carrots and the sticks. So the first one is a clear carrot would be, for example, the boiler upgrade scheme that provides customers with £7,500 towards the cost of a new heat pump. So a large value that is given directly to the customer to have that installation, definitely a carrot. The stick would be the banning of new gas boilers in new homes. So that is a change that is not just to incentivize, that is an enforced change. And you'll see there's lots of different ones that you can pick out there. Mick, we'll go back on mute and I'll pass you back onto the next slide.
Thanks, Chris. So earlier on, I mentioned that retrofitting needs to be financially viable for people to get on board. In this slide dives a little deeper into that. So what I've tried to do is show a comparison of single measure retrofits, most common being solar panels and heat pumps, versus some of the more innovative approach we're seeing in the market. I've used Octopus's zero bills proposition as an example, and I've used the retrofit of existing homes zero bills proposition, not the new build proposition. So heat pumps and solar typically have long payback periods of around 8 to 12 years. And this can be even more in cases where homes are fitting a heat pump and they need more extensive pre-work to get the home heat pump ready. But also the annual savings on energy bills also tend to be really modest. With the current cost of electricity being far higher than gas, this is quite prohibitive to the take-up of things like heat pumps. In this, at the moment, the cost of electricity is making the running costs of heat pumps relatively high and not particularly viable. Annual savings from solar are a little larger, but still relatively modest. And that's due to the relatively high upfront costs. And there's no grants for solar in the able to pay sector like they are for heat pumps. So the combination of low savings from energy bills and long payback periods often means that single measure retrofits aren't really financially or economically viable. So we're seeing more innovation here, more innovation coming to market through the likes of Octopus's zero bills, which has a much more compelling financial business case for homeowners. So zero bills sees a number of simultaneous installations being undertaken. And the aim of that is for the home to become energy self-sufficient. So the home produces all the energy it uses. And that is linked to that kit. So the solar, the battery, the heat pump, that's linked to a state-of-the-art energy use optimization system called Kraken. And that really does all of the clever stuff behind the scenes. But what that enables is for Octopus to provide a guarantee that zero bills homes won't incur any energy costs for 5 years on the retrofits. And the guarantee is as high as 10 years on new builds. So that means that if you're paying £200, £300, £400 a month to E.ON, British Gas, whoever it is, converting to a zero bills home would completely remove that monthly outgoing. So by completely removing your monthly outgoing energy bills, that saving to the average household could be anywhere from around £2,000 to £4,000 per year. So it's massive. It starts to make financial sense. And where you're talking to a client, if a client has got £2,000 to £4,000 back in their pocket every year, could they use that money to overpay on their mortgage? So they're not only saving on energy, they're also saving large amounts of mortgage interest by repaying loans faster. So some real nice links into broader conversations with clients. And such a proposition like this also reduces the payback period to around 4 to 6 years. So again, making a much stronger business case for households. So we're really starting to see some innovation in the market that makes a lot more sense. And whilst the data doesn't exist yet, it's assumed that homes with no energy bills are likely to attract a premium, making these type of propositions even more compelling. So I think the reason I've used Octopus's zero bills, I think it's a fantastic example of how one of the biggest barriers to retrofitting, so the upfront costs and a lengthy payback, can be overcome through thinking outside the box. Chris, I'll hand back again to you quickly just to share some thoughts on what else we're doing and how we can work with brokers, but I'm conscious we're running short on time. So if we can make this slide, and I'll make my last slide very brief.
That's absolutely fine. So yeah, when we reflect on our propositions, bringing it back down to Santander, we have realised that there is one key missing factor. What we've been doing is providing the customer with the solution before we inform them of the problem. So often, you know, they may not be aware why these things would be important. And that in turn then creates a more difficult conversation for customers and for you as brokers. So what we really are thinking about as our future iteration is how can we take the best bits of what we've currently done and mesh that in with our new current thinking. So rather than focusing purely on just retrofitting, thinking about the wider concept of what are home improvements. So just to give you a very quick example of that before I hand back to Mick, if we think about a customer who's borrowing additional money to do home improvements, the extension that could be built on that house today would need to meet the new current building regulations. So as a result, that extension could be more energy efficient than the rest of the home. And it could be that whilst the customer's making those changes to the home, they also need to think about the other improvements that they can make along the way. So, you know, for example, future-proofing their heating systems, etc. So there's lots of thoughts that we're having at the moment, which we're really trying to keep that customer conversation at the centre to, and making sure that we can support them throughout this journey. Mick, I'll come back to you.
Great, thanks, Chris. And this almost brings us to a close. So I wanted to wrap up by summarising some of the key points. So the challenge to green our homes isn't going away. It's a massive change. It has to happen over the next decade to put us on track to achieve net zero by 2050. In the near term, 18 million homes are going to have to make some change to reach the minimum EPC target. Brokers and lenders are uniquely placed to reach out to many of these 18 million households, either through our lending relationships or through other financial products. Rightmove estimate the cost to do this is a staggering 200 billion. It's not yet clear how this cost will be met, but it is likely that homeowners and landlords will have to find some, if not most, of this money. This will undoubtedly create a big lending opportunity, as many households will need to raise finance to fund these improvements. The incoming minimum energy efficiency standards legislation will impact landlords first. So it's important that conversations with clients and customers start sooner rather than later. Are your buy-to-let clients aware what is coming? Have they got a plan? How are they funding the improvements? Are they looking to change the mix of properties in their portfolio? i.e., are they looking to reduce their portfolio and sell off some of the less efficient properties? And are they looking to, when growing their portfolios, purchase properties, and energy efficiency becomes a much more important factor in that purchasing decision? And whilst many landlords will be aware, and some will have even started preparations to be compliant, not all will be. So at Santander UK, we've got around 45,000 customers with buy-to-let properties that are in EPC bands D and below. So this presents both a challenge and an opportunity for us. So green finance is evolving, and as an industry, we're trying different approaches. We're developing partnerships with the supply chain. We're building new digital journeys and interactive tools and developing new products. There has been some fantastic progress in the industry, but we haven't got it right yet. We're still trying new things. We're still learning. We're still gathering feedback, and we're still listening. I think brokers will play a significant part in the challenge to retrofit these 18 million homes. We need your insight and input to help us so that we develop products and propositions so that we get it right for your clients. And whilst demand is currently low, this provides the perfect environment for us to test and learn, a chance to get things wrong in a safe environment so that we can continue to innovate and learn. And this is really necessary to make sure we are ready for when that demand increases for when legislation lands, for when new government incentives or support comes out. So the role for financial services will play is evolving and will likely be broader than our normal remit. And I think it's up to us on this call to shape that and to grasp what I see as a once in a lifetime opportunity. And then just, Chris, on the final slide, just some final thoughts to leave everyone with before we open up for Q&As.
Thanks so much to you both for that really informative presentation. We've got some questions that have come in. So we have one here, which is from a broker who's saying he works in partnership with a solar installation firm. He offers clients with advice and guidance on lender retrofitting incentives. So brokers offer to arrange additional finance for them where we can, but the financial reward by lenders doesn't make the time spent financially viable to service the client. What can lenders do to incentivize brokers, likely financially, to do this, other than knowing that they're doing the right thing? It's a bit of a hefty question to start off with, but I don't know if Mick, you want to take that first.
Yeah.
Do you think it is that kind of lender broker exchange, I suppose, will have to kind of be changed in light of the kind of energy efficiency focus?
It's a really good question, and something we've been trying to figure out ourselves for the last 12 months or so. So the challenge we have as lenders is we need to be able to evidence any funds any funds released for, that have the green label. We can evidence that money has been spent on green retrofits. But the challenge at the other end is, if you look to do an incentive around a rate or a product to recognize and reward that client or customer, that has to be done upfront. So it's, how do we do something that gives the brokers the confidence to talk to customers about products that benefit the customers? But then how do we know that at the back end of it, we'll get the confirmation that the customer has used that funds, to put new windows in, to put insulation or a new heating system in, haven't just used that money to go off and buy a new car. So it's trying to figure out how we do that. And that's one of the reasons why we landed on cashback incentives, because we can pay the cash back at the point we get validation from the installer, the installation's happened. So I think it's an area where we know there's a big gap at the moment. We don't necessarily have the perfect answer. I know different lenders are approaching it in different ways, but what we are open to is working with brokers to figure out how we can build those products and propositions so that they do meet that need.
Great. Chris, do you have anything to add to that, or I'm kind of happy with Mick's answer at the moment?
No, just to add on the fact that we do have regular dialogue with brokers, so we're already receiving that feedback. We take it into account, and it is a big challenge, and it's not just a challenge, as Mick says, that faces Santander. It's an industry-wide challenge of how we can ensure that the money has been used for green finance. So
we do absolutely want to recognise and reward clients and customers who do the right thing. We just need to find out how we do that in a controlled way that enables us to have assurance that that money is being used for green purposes.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And something that I picked out was within that 18 million homes figure, which is really quite a scary figure, to get to the EPCC rating. Are there going to be some properties in that will probably be really, really difficult for them to get to that level, or maybe impossible for them to get to that level? And so will there have to be exceptions with, on that, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a Rightmove estimate around 1.7 million properties, which I think is about 6% of properties in the UK, will not be able to reach EPC Band C. So we have to accept that some of the housing stock has an energy efficiency ceiling. And whilst these homes can hopefully still make some improvements, not all will make it to that minimum C. And I think if you look at listed homes in England, there's about 350,000 listed homes in England. So that's a unique challenge in itself. And they cannot get to C, even if you throw money at them. So yes, I think there'll need to be some exemptions, especially where property owners have taken reasonable steps to make improvements. I don't think going from some of the lower EPC bands to E's, F, G's to C in a single step will be practical or financially possible for many homes. So it may mean a longer path with several steps for certain homes. And also the technology required might not even exist yet. I think, from the various reports I've read, they suggest about 75 to 85% of residential properties could achieve EPC band C. I don't think any report is saying 100% can or will.
Yeah. There's another question that's come through, which is, the focus for EPCs at the moment is kind of on that buy-to-let sector. It is on, getting, like you said, getting all tenancies. At the moment, the proposed legislation is all tenancies by 2030 to have an EPCC rating, which is not that far away. Do you think that there also needs to be a focus as well on the residential side rather than just, I'm saying just buy-to-let, but I'm not meaning to be flippant, but do you think there also needs to be an equal focus on improving that residential homeowners segment as well?
Absolutely. I think if we are to hit net zero, if we are to hit the interim targets on the pathway to net zero, you have to look at the much bigger segment of housing, which is outside of the private rental sector. I know the government are looking at it. I know there's a lending industry, and I think the broker community have been involved in early discussions around a package of measures, whether that be incentives or legislation, to see how we can do more in the residential owner-occupier space, because that's where you'll move the dial the most. Definitely not an easy challenge. There's probably more trigger points in the private rented sector process for you to introduce requirements for EPCs or work to be done. So yeah, absolutely. We can't ignore the owner occupied space, because that's gonna have the biggest impact on improving the housing stock in the UK.
Great. We have another question coming through, which is talking about Santander's Tomorrow Homes report. They were just asking, is there the report or survey produced that brokers can send to their clients so that to help gauge their current thinking and help kind of signpost things that might be coming down the track, or kind of creating discussion points for them to talk to their clients?
Really good idea. Absolutely. Be delighted to share the report, because I think that's the purpose we've done it for, to get people talking, to raise awareness, to get people thinking. So if it's seen as a valuable tool that's got information in there that brokers can share with their clients, that'd be brilliant. That's why we've done it. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, well, we can look at sending a copy of the report along with this presentation after this masterclass, if there's that, just to make sure everyone's got those kinds of resources at their disposal. I suppose just to round, just looking at the time, I mean, if you kind of mentioned a few things that people could do that's quite easy first steps, I guess, like even just finding out the EPC ratings for their different owner occupier or landlord customers. But I suppose if you had a broker in front of you being like, I want to do more on this, I just have no idea where to start, it all seems really overwhelming, what would you say to them?
Really good question. I think we know there's reasonably good levels of interest out there, and we know that interest isn't turning into action. What we're looking to do is try to plug some of those knowledge gaps we found. So how can we make it easier for brokers and their clients to access information, even just basic things like finding out their EPC? But how can we deliver things like interactive tools that will enable brokers and customers to look at properties, to figure out what steps that can be taken that are specific to that property, the likely benefit of taking those steps, the likely cost of taking those steps, and the best sequence in which to do it. So how can we provide interactive tools that start to help that conversation, and how can we then continue the journey so that if customers are then interested, how can they find the right installer? So building, again, digital tools to help with that. And also you know, I think, you know, are we, from the research we've done, many customers and clients today will be making green home improvements as a consequence of a bigger home improvement project. So that's probably a good place to start. So you know, if you're putting an extension in, or you're putting a loft conversion, or you actually, as a byproduct of that, improving the insulation, as Chris mentioned, due to building regulations, putting new windows in. So some of those things are happening already. So how can we make sure that we are aware of those, and we start to talk about energy efficiency when we're having a broader conversation around home improvements?
Yeah, so I suppose it's almost just making sure that you include it in conversations you may already be having, and kind of just signpost like, hey, look, if you're doing this, then there is this kind of, these are the things that you might want to consider. And you know, I think also attending masterclasses like this also is a very good way to upskill yourself, just to kind of see what the lay of the land is. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but thank you so much to everyone who's joined this masterclass. I hope you found it as informative and helpful as I did, and thank you so much to Mick and Chris for sharing their expertise and the Santander Tomorrow Homes report, which hopefully we will be able to attach with the presentation when we send out when we send this post masterclass. So thank you very much. Thank you to you both, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.